Welcome to Murfreesboro Storyteller. For this edition, we're originating at St. Thomas Rutherford Hospital in the office of Gordon Ferguson, who is the CEO of St. Thomas Rutherford and president of St. Thomas Regional Hospitals. Gordon, welcome to Storyteller.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here.
Tell us about this wonderful facility. You're about to celebrate the 9th year?
That's correct. We moved into the new hospital on October 10th, 2010.
Okay.
I'm always impressed that people are still calling us the new hospital.
Yeah.
But as you know, we did start back in the old location in 1927.
Right. Well, we want to recognize the Commonwealth Fund of New York for what they did in 1927 with that grant.
Right.
As I recall, $180,000, something like that.
Right.
Thought that not thought that, a group of the leaders in the community went to them seeking funding to build a hospital.
That's correct. It's interesting just to look back on our history and Mr. Christie and the work that he did pulling a group together. Originally got money to start a clinic as part of a children's demonstration project, and that eventually led to a grant for building a new hospital back then on University Avenue.
And back then, as I recall, Commonwealth Fund was really interested in some of the health conditions in the South.
Correct.
To make it better, and as a result of that, we got the clinic and what became Rutherford Hospital.
That's right. That's right. I can only imagine what was going on and the excitement in the community about having a new hospital, and always will remember the original A building that we referred to and the colonial architecture that it had. And I know we took a lot of heat when we had to demolish that building, but we were very fortunate in being able to have it designated as one of the historical sites by the state.
Mm-hmm. And MTSU has that property now as a part of its campus, right?
That's right. We tried to think of who might want to buy a hospital that had been added on to several times, and it was back when the market was not doing as well as we're doing today, and just could not find the right buyer. So we ended up making the decision to demolish the main hospital buildings, and we were very fortunate with MTSU in need of some additional buildings. Came along and acquired the property, including the Bell Street building and the parking garage.
Eventually, as I recall, the board of directors decided to sell the hospital, and that became of great interest in the community and was sold to St. Thomas and Baptist hospitals, right?
That's right. Back in 1986, the hospital was sold to Baptist Hospital and St. Thomas Hospital. My understanding is the first time that a Catholic organization and a Protestant organization that got together as a true partnership and joint venture, and was actually covered in several of the healthcare publications about how that deal was put together. I think that was certainly a key milestone in the history of the hospital. We shortly before that had changed the name from Rutherford Hospital to Middle Tennessee Medical Center, and Mr. James Arnhart was the administrator for many years up until that time, and then Art Hastings was brought in as the CEO, and did a great job with adding on to the building and acquiring new equipment as the city of Murfreesboro and Rutherford began a growth pattern at that time.
And you followed Art as the CEO?
There was actually Donald Ginzik was here for just a few years before he took a role in the Navy Reserve. And I was fortunate enough in 2005 to be named the interim CEO, and a search was done during a 6-month period, and in March of 2006 I had the privilege of being named the CEO. My hair was a lot darker then than it is now, but it really has been a privilege to serve in this this role.
Let's talk about that transition and what you brought to the community with this wonderful facility that you have now.
The transition was somewhat easy. I had been functioning as the chief operating officer up until that point, and I started at what was then MTMC back in 1998, the beginning of the year, and it was toward the end of that year that we started talking about the possibility of building a replacement hospital. There were actually drawings that had been put together to add a floor on to the old hospital. But when we looked at that, at the end of the day, we didn't feel that strategically we were in the right location in terms of access to the hospital. So we went through a long process, and when I was named CEO, we had actually acquired the property for the new hospital, but we had not received approval from Ascension to move forward with the actual construction.
And Ascension is your corporate headquarters,
That's correct.
right now.
Ascension is based in St. Louis. It's the largest not-for-profit healthcare system, and it's based with the Catholic Church. But it was a challenge because we had worked a deal with the help of the late Matt Murfree to buy the property from the city, and one of our requirements for the sale was that a road be built to the new interchange with I-24, and that road would be called Medical Center Parkway. So it was interesting in that construction of that interchange and parkway was complete, but there was no hospital. And so our physicians were getting a little bit anxious about, are we going to build this hospital or not? But it was a large investment, around $270 million, and we had to do a lot of due diligence with Ascension to show that this was the right thing to do. Unfortunately, I think it was around 2007 that we received the final approval to build the new facility.
You mentioned the cost of it, the funding. How did you go about funding the new facility?
We certainly the majority of the funding came from Ascension, but they like for projects like this to have some local fundraising support. And so we put together a capital campaign council and had several key community leaders there, and had a goal of $20 million. And we were very fortunate that the Christy Houston Foundation board saw fit that in addition to the $3 million that they contributed toward the land, they contributed $10 million toward that campaign. And then through several very generous donors, we were able to reach our goal and raise an additional $10 million. And that's what provided the source of funds.
The money for the sale of the hospital to Baptist and St. Thomas, did that go into Christy Houston Foundation?
That is exactly how the Christy Houston Foundation started. And again, I'll refer back to Matt Murfree and some other long-term community leaders had the vision and the insight that as part of the negotiation, the proceeds of the hospital, which I think was around $40 million
I remember 40, 45.
Right. That would be used to create more or less an endowment for bettering the community through healthcare activities or other initiatives that would really improve the quality of life in Rutherford County.
Oh, what Christy Houston has added to this community is just marvelous. That $45 million has really made a lot of organizations stronger and better.
That's right. And my hats go off to those that have served on that board over the years and certainly have helped us with major medical equipment. I know that they helped us acquire our first surgical robot, and then our mobile wellness unit was one that has continued to provide great service. But they are also very supportive of other community initiatives that really help the overall quality of life that we have here.
Let's talk about what you have here and what you offer to the community that you didn't have before, that you want to have.
When we moved here, we were able to have 286 licensed beds.
Okay.
And back at the old hospital, the most we could fit in that hospital was right at 215 patients, and that was really squeezing them in.
I'm sure.
Of course, back at the old facility, our rooms were not nearly as large as our rooms here. So I think from a patient comfort aspect, our rooms are very well designed in terms of having natural light come in the window. We try to make it as home-like as possible with the wood laminated floors. For our staff, we thought of a few things that we could do to make their work life easier in terms of their break areas and a nice open cafeteria. And then just a lot of work was put into the design of the hospital to make it a comforting place rather than your older traditional sterile hospitals. Then I think also our location has helped make us much more accessible. I will acknowledge that we do now have our challenges with parking that we are addressing in different ways, but and then also this building has allowed us to recruit a good number of new physicians to the community. Just last year alone, we were able to recruit 42 new physicians in different specialties. We continue to emphasize cardiology. We've got a lot of expertise in the area of orthopedics. We have a very, I think, well-respected delivery program in terms of births and obstetricians on our medical staff. Last year alone, or last fiscal year, we did well over 3,000, almost 4,000 births.
Is that?
And that is an area that we continue to see a lot of growth. And then our oncology program. We've got 2 linear accelerators, a great staff of radiation therapists that work within St. Thomas as well as Tennessee Oncology.
And no doubt many services, like you've already indicated, that you couldn't or didn't offer before.
That's right. A few changes that have occurred just since we've moved over here. One is our affiliation with the University of Tennessee in Memphis, where we now have residents in the areas of emergency medicine and family medicine. So we have met the criteria and are accredited to be a teaching hospital.
Oh, wonderful.
So we currently have 24 emergency medicine residents and 24 family medicine residents. Another area that we've added is in the specialty of interventional radiology. So we now have 3 interventional radiologists that are using one room and one machine, but we're hoping to add some additional equipment here in the near future.
What makes it different to be interventional?
This is where they go through the training to be a regular radiologist, where you take the x-rays and the film. When it's interventional, you're actually going into the body with various instruments to really get a better look of what's going on.
Now, I'm sure you serve other counties around here that you must have many residents that come into here for service as well.
That's correct, although the vast majority of our patients still originate from Rutherford, but over the last few years, particularly with our acquisition of several smaller hospitals, we're seeing more patients come in from these outlying areas simply because we've got the specialists here available. one of the struggles that are facing not just our smaller hospitals, but rural hospitals across the country is just the lack of specialty care. And that is putting a lot of stress on the financial viability of these hospitals that we're reading about in the media, and it's a real issue. The hospitals that we have acquired, 3 of the 4 have geropsych facilities, so they're treating some of the behavioral health issues of the geriatric population. That is helping them a great deal, but that hospitals that don't have a program like that or don't have a lot of surgical procedures available are really having a hard time.
What are the locations of those 4?
The 4 that we acquired just over 3 years ago are located in Woodbury, Sparta, Smithville, and McMinnville.
And you have responsibility for those hospitals as well as here, right?
I do. I have the privilege of overseeing these 4. We've got chief administrative officers at each of the 4 facilities, but we do a lot of video conferencing, and we have one board over these regional facilities that meets here on a quarterly basis.
That's a separate board for the other than the one you have for St. Thomas.
That's correct.
Rutherford. Yeah,
That's correct.
Tell us about the construction going on. We notice you're adding some floors to the building.
We are. Our original configuration, we had 5 floors on the west tower and 7 on the east. Both towers were structured to go up to 8 floors. So on the west wing, we're adding 3 floors. That's the activity that you see taking place right now. We are going to complete 2 of these 3 floors to give us an additional 72 beds. So when the project is complete, it will increase our licensed capacity to 358 beds. In addition to that, we are adding 4 operating rooms on the other side of the hospital. It's kind of hidden, so a lot of people don't see this part of the project, but we will have 4 additional suites that will give us a total of 16 operating rooms.
What's your timetable on the construction?
We are on schedule to be complete around the spring of next year. And after we go through all the testing and the licensure approvals, our target is to take on additional patients as well as the operating room suites in July of 2020.
2020, okay, very good. You mentioned about the struggle that small rural hospitals are having, and apparently this is a real problem, I guess, not only in Tennessee but otherwise, but we've had several rural hospitals in Tennessee to close, as I recall.
That's right. That's right. I think further out West Tennessee and up in the plateau, you know, it's difficult because folks really need a hospital in their community, particularly for emergencies that come up. The unfortunate thing is just what we're seeing in terms of the payer mix. There are a good number of patients that are charity patients that just don't have the insurance or the means to pay. But that's compounded by the fact that physician recruitment, sometimes it's very difficult to get, particularly your specialists, to locate in these smaller areas. And even emergency rooms don't get the utilization that they may have had in the past as people are driving into the larger facilities. So it's not just one issue that we might be able to solve. There's multiple issues that are driving these hospitals to close.
And funding or lack of funding is the major problem, I presume.
That's right. And I know there are several efforts underway looking at how these hospitals are reimbursed, but some just simply are not able to meet their payroll and have to close.
Will this put more demands on hospitals like St. Thomas Rutherford, I presume?
It will, and I think we're already seeing that, where you'll have your larger regional facilities. And I think emergency rooms across our state are stressed with seeing more and more patients from these outlying areas. And so we've got to be kind of thinking ahead about what will be required to do to be able to accommodate that additional volume.
I'm sure recruiting is a major challenge constantly. Are there certain specialties that you are seeking that you would like to add to the hospital?
You know, it's interesting with some of our existing physicians reaching retirement age.
Yes.
Recruitment is just an ongoing endeavor. Primary care continues to be one of the areas where we see the largest deficit, and we were fortunate enough to be able to put a care center on New Salem Highway, and we've got, I believe, almost 15 providers there. We've also brought in some additional orthopedic surgeons as part of Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance. And then cardiology is another area that we're continuing to grow. But fortunately, Middle Tennessee and Murfreesboro, Rutherford County is a great place to recruit. We've got great education system, things that folks are looking for, and so we are fortunate in being able to recruit these new physicians.
When you said care center on the Salem Highway, what are you able to offer there?
In addition to your traditional primary care, we've also got a diagnostic imaging center there, so different modalities that you would expect. We also have outpatient physical therapy there in the one building.
Okay. Tell us about your staff. How large a staff do you have to maintain this operation?
We have just over, I would say right now we're about 1,200 employees. When you look at full-time equivalents, it's just shy of 1,000, but we continue to rely on our both our medical schools for our hospitalists and nursing schools to give us the supply of labor that we need. But it's a challenge. Nursing is a difficult job, and we're not open just 8 to 5 or your regular hours. We are truly a 24/7, 365 operation, and there are so many other opportunities for healthcare professionals to go into, whether it's a freestanding surgery center or one that doesn't have the night shift or the on-call responsibilities. But we are trying our best to attract the best and the brightest, and then once they're here, make sure that we are meeting their needs and treating them with respect and giving them the tools and the equipment that they need to carry out their jobs. But we are certainly one of the largest employers in Rutherford County.
Sure, yeah. And you have a board of directors that oversees the operation?
We have a local advisory board that we've got 13 members on that board. Mr. George White has chaired that board for the last couple of years, and then just as of July 1st, Bill Jones took over as the board chair. And then we've got another board that's over all of St. Thomas Health.
Okay, very good. So they meet periodically, I'm sure, to be able to advise and help and support.
Right. That's right.
If you had a wish list, what would be at the top of that wish list now? You've got so much wonderful facilities.
Right now, additional parking is at the top of my list. It's frustrating, I know, for our patients who come here, particularly those that are elderly, to find a parking space. And we thought having 80 acres here that parking would not be a problem, but we have implemented valet parking for our medical office buildings.
I've noticed that.
And then we're in the process of putting some additional temporary parking for our staff, and that will free up space for our patients and visitors.
And you have the shuttle service also on the parking lot.
We have got a wonderful group of volunteers that drive the golf carts and are constantly patrolling the lots, asking folks if they need a ride to the main entrance, and we're just very grateful for these volunteers that do that.
You think you may need to build a parking facility eventually?
That has come up.
Okay.
We've actually re-engaged our master facility planners to come and look about what would be our next wave of expansion, and parking is certainly
I noticed
part of
on
it.
some of the outlying streets around the hospital now, employees are parking on those streets and to be able to free up
That's correct.
space.
They're parking on what we call the ring road,
Yeah,
and
the
that
ring
has certainly helped.
Sure
Part of our
does.
parking is because of giving up space for the construction. So we
Oh,
will
I hadn't thought about
we will
that.
regain those
Yeah, right,
spaces when the
yes.
project is complete.
Well, Gordon, you have a wonderful facility. You've done a great job, and it's such an important part of the community that you work and direct every day.
Well, thanks, John. It's a privilege to be part of this growing medical community, and we're just very fortunate to have the caliber of physicians that we have here, and the quality of our associates is just great.
Gordon Ferguson, the President and CEO of St. Thomas Rutherford Hospital, and also President of St. Thomas Regional Hospitals. Thank you, Gordon, for joining us, and congratulations on the wonderful service you render.
Thank you, John.